Without further ado, maybe a big welcome to our next speaker, Professor Dr. Maryline Filippi. She is a professor of economics from the Bordeaux Science Agro department at the Bordeaux University. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Or did I mix it up? But big welcome and applause for her.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very grateful to Professor Tin Demour for our invitation and inspiration. And it's a great honor or pleasure to be here with you and to share some research results. Professor Tin Demour challenges us. We invite her in the research conference of Cooperative Alliance in Paris in 2021, and she gave a wonderful and inspiring keynote on the new cooperativism. About the need to renew the cooperative spirit. And so when she invited me, I said, okay, maybe I have to think about this idea to renew the cooperative spirit and how to re-engage citizens, employees, people in their business, in their community. And so to do this, let me share one idea, one way to renew the cooperative spirit. It's in fact to root cooperatives in their foundation, in their basis, in their value, and in their local area. And so how we re-engage people in community, how to reduce social and economic inequality, what is our responsibility, and what does it mean to be responsible? So responsible for whom? People, planet. Okay, so to do that, I want to share research that we developed with colleagues from different backgrounds, institutional, cooperatives, geographical studies, sociologists, and also with people, with citizens. We organize a workshop with them to discuss what is the needs to re-roll cooperative spirit, how to do that, what is the importance, and what we have to do to be responsible. What does this mean? So I will combine different backgrounds in order to explain, and I will just focus on the result in order to be more clear on what we find around a new notion of the responsibility. And as I will explain, the corporate territorial responsibility. So usually, responsibility is well developed in management and around the theory of stakeholders as an entrepreneurial practices. And we have a lot of discussion between the controversy between Friedman and Freeman. And the idea is to focus on if the responsibility is something very important, we have no law to define what is a responsible behavior, what is it. So the idea is to say, how we demonstrate the responsibility. So we start with the Austrian notion of community, and to say, community is a system of resources jointly used by the group of people and common rules in order to manage these resources in cooperative manner. And in this way, the community is not only something closed, but an open notion, an open community for think global and act local. Act locally and think globally it's also to take into account the environment, but also the human being. And to do that, in fact, when you base on the community approach with colleagues, we propose the notion of corporate territorial responsibility, CTR, a way to strengthen cooperative behavior and to push corporate social responsibility to collective action. To be sure that when you develop social responsibility, you are very engaged to take into account the impact of the social, economic, and environmental action of your activities. So let me explain what is the main difference between the corporate social responsibility and the territorial social responsibility. In fact, discussing with researchers and also stakeholders, we underline two different dynamics. The first one is the shift between individual perspective to collective perspective. And the second dynamic is to think strategy from concrete individual needs and not from the supply side. And this morning we have very nice presentation that they present the cooperative housing, the way to take into account the needs of people. And we have a lot of example, good example in different countries to see, to demonstrate that the switch is very important to become more collective and more responsible. So the first dynamic is to think about the responsibility. As I say, is not a clear definition because in fact there is no law that defines what is responsibility is, in fact. We have, sure, different codes, labor code, for example, in order to define what is a good way to have good practices for the job, but we don't know how to be responsibility with the impact, the social impact and the environmental impact. So we have standards that explain to the guild the practices, like, for example, ISO 26000 or B Corp, but not financial declaration that frame the practice of companies for more virtual practices. But this corporate social responsibility is challenged by the fact that, in fact, the content of action does not all the time correspond to a more virtuous behavior. And so they turn on collective action to obtain a license to operate. Why? Because, in fact, the corporate social responsibility have a political dimension, and the company needs to be driven with the issue of the community. And those underline the transition from individual to collective action. The second dimension that's very differentiates corporate social responsibility to territorial responsibility is the fact that you have to take into account needs of people in order to offer strategy or to offer a way to help companies and also territorial policymakers in order to help and to take planet and people. Policymakers as well companies must start from concrete needs and co-build concrete solutions. For example, when you offer a job, you have to take maybe into account the fact that for people, we have to take the transportation or the nursery of all the things that's very important in order to help them to get the job. Reconcile works with the value of the company is very important. Also, in order to avoid the get-off. For example, with the young people, we are very challenged because they are sometimes they are very engaged to support action and commitment in desire to defend climate. See, for example, Greta Thunberg. So, as a parents, we have the responsibility to encourage our children to not give up, but to help them to align their value and their way to develop their activity. So we have to reconcile value and action. And this explains why the corporate social responsibility is not enough to guarantee our responsibility for planet and for environment and for people. And that means that we have to think about the place, the role played by territory, by the local area. What does it mean and how and why it is the basis for collective action. So let me give 2 examples in order to underline how it changed and why territory changed the fact. I will give you the example of territorial cluster of economic cooperation. It's certainly one of the most visible and successful forms of social and ecological innovation clusters in Europe. The territorial pole of economic cooperation bring together in the same local area a group of actors in the field around a common economic project and to promote local territorial development. These cooperating stakeholders come from social and solidarity economy, such associations, such cooperatives, but they can also bring local authorities, traditional law companies, universities, to recreate sectors and jobs and to revitalize socially and economically depressed areas. In Germany, Belgium, Italy, and different countries, for example, the food sector includes the development of short supply chain associating farmers, retailers, local public, and operators as citizens, units with a common goal: give a fair remuneration to producers and to propose good products to consumers. And that's it's very important to see how now you can rethink the political, the food policy in order to support farmers as well as consumers. Another example is the experimentation in France, but now also in Wallonia, around the zero long-term unemployment territory. This experiment is new because, in fact, they try to give a job to people who, in order to reduce the long-term unemployment in a territorial scale. So this is an experiment with tested in different countries, and for example, Wallonia financed a 20 pilot project in its territory in order to base contracts between people we are far west from unemployment, with the project leaders to define and to build together the job and the activity. And that is really new. It's a different way to try to reduce inequality, social and economic inequality. So these two dynamics switch from individual to collective and to need, from offer to need, in fact, underline the very different way to think responsibility and collective responsibility. So, go back to the notion of the territory, and that we learn during this research program. Territory is not only a place, rural area, beautiful city like Rotterdam, or peri-urban is not only a place. It's a combination between agglomeration and density of activity. It's more, in fact, a social construction through a process of collective action. It's a way to make society. That is really different, and it's very important in order to take care of human and natural resources. It is a place to create new solutions, face major challenges, to create a new solution in order to recreate social relation. So, the territorial responsibilities serve community that aim to restore the power to act to citizens. It's also the convergence of the sometimes contradictory interests of the actor, and it's part of complex process of territorial anchorage because it is a long-term and multi-level. And so, as literature underline, place matters. So the challenge to articulate the economic system, the natural system, and the political system to recognize the creation of collective rules and the formation of the value chain is allow the creation to reconcile community for reduce inequality. So, in order to conclude, I would say that renewal the cooperative spirit is to diffuse the cooperative value and open cooperative to the community, as suggested by Professor Tindemou, when she make as her keynotes. So now the questions are more on how to measure responsibility and how to measure and to help support people to bring together new solution, co-build new solution. So thank you once again, Professor Tindemou, for your inspiration and research on collective action. And thank you for all to listening.